There are two ways to build something genuinely new. You can invent an entirely new way of making it, in a special facility, by hand, at enormous cost. Or you can find a way to build it on the machines the world already has, the ones that already make millions of things a day. The first route gets the magazine covers. The second route is the one that actually changes your life, and it almost never gets reported because it looks like nothing is happening. Now, I should say where I stand, because this video is going to end with an opinion. I think a result published this month from a European research institute and an Australian company is one of the more important quantum computing stories of the year, and that the headline number attached to it, which is a rather small one, is completely the wrong thing to focus on. The interesting part is not how many, it is where they were made. Because quantum computing has a manufacturing problem that almost nobody talks about, hidden underneath the physics problem that everybody does. Even if you can build a handful of these strange devices in a laboratory, a useful machine needs an enormous number of them, and building an enormous number of anything reliably and identically is a completely different skill from building one. And if you ask most people what stands between us and a useful quantum computer, they would say, we need the qubits to be better, less fragile, less error prone. That is true, and it is genuinely hard. But you know what? There is a second wall right behind that one, and it is much more boring and possibly more decisive. Even a perfect qubit is useless if you cannot manufacture a million of them. So here is what we are going to do. First, what a qubit actually is, in the version that matters here. Then, why the way you make it is the whole story. And finally, the big one. What was actually demonstrated this month? The number that is not the point, and the number that is. First up, the qubit. A normal computer bit is a switch, on or off, 1 or 0. A quantum bit, a qubit, exploits the fact that very small things can sit in a blend of both at once, and it is that blend that gives a quantum computer its strange power. There are many rival ways to physically build one, and they are genuinely different technologies competing. The kind in this story is called a spin qubit. You take a single electron, trap it in a tiny structure on a silicon chip, and use a property of that electron called its spin as the 1 and the 0. And the reason this particular kind is interesting is almost suspiciously mundane. A spin qubit is, physically, extremely close to the transistor that already sits inside every device you own. That resemblance is the entire strategic bet. The world already has an industry that makes silicon transistors by the billion on large disks of silicon called 300mm wafers in fabrication plants of extraordinary precision. If your qubit looks enough like a transistor, then in principle you can borrow all of that. You do not have to build a new industry. You can rent the most sophisticated one that already exists. The trouble is that in principle has been doing a lot of quiet work in that sentence for years. Making one spin qubit or two in a research setting is a solved problem. Making them on a genuine industrial production line, the same way you would make an ordinary chip, and having them still behave, is the part that has stubbornly resisted. And this is where the work published this month comes in, from IMEC, a major microelectronics research institute in Belgium, together with Dirac, an Australian quantum company. Their result was reported in a peer-reviewed paper, which matters, because this is a field where impressive sounding demonstrations sometimes arrive by press release and quietly never reproduce. Here is the headline, and it sounds modest. They operated 8 spin qubits. 8. You are right to think that 8 of anything is not a computer. Companies elsewhere talk about hundreds and thousands. Read on its own, 8 is a number that invites a shrug, and most coverage stopped roughly here. Here is the part that is the actual news. Those 8 qubits were made on a standard 300mm production line, using the same kind of process used for ordinary chips, and they still worked coherently together. This is the jump from 2, which was a laboratory result, to 8, made the industrial way. The point was never the 8. The point is the address. And there is a subtler result tucked inside it that matters even more, and it is the kind of thing that gets cut from every summary. When they scaled up from 2 qubits to 8, the machinery needed to read those qubits out did not have to grow in proportion. You did not need 4 times the sensors, or 4 times the wiring, or 4 times the heat. That may sound like a technicality. It is close to the whole game. The reason large quantum computers are so fearsomely hard is that everything tends to grow together. More qubits usually means proportionally more wiring, more sensors, more heat leaking into a system that only works when it is kept colder than deep space. If the support machinery grows more slowly than the qubits do, then the design does not collapse under its own plumbing as it scales. That is the difference between a demonstration and a road. So let me separate the two numbers cleanly, because everything depends on not confusing them. 8 is a number that is not the point. It is small, and on its own, it is unremarkable, and if you only read that number, you would rightly move on. The number that is the point does not appear on the chip at all. It is 300, as in 300mm wafers, the ordinary industrial format. It says that these qubits were made the way the world already makes 1 trillion transistors a year, rather than by hand in a bespoke lab. That is the sentence the whole field has been waiting to be able to write. And on the strength of it, the company involved has laid out a roadmap that is frankly enormous. Devices with hundreds of qubits next, then thousands by the end of the decade, then more than 1 million a couple of years after that. Whether they hit those dates is genuinely unknowable. But the shape of the ambition only makes sense at all if the manufacturing route is real. And honestly, this is where I want to push against the way these things are told, because it slightly irritates me. Quantum computing coverage is addicted to the qubit count, a single rising number treated like a scoreboard, one company against another. And that number, on its own, is very close to meaningless, because a qubit count says nothing about quality, or connectivity, or whether the approach can ever be scaled. It is the parameter that markets the machine, not the one that measures it. Now, to be fair, none of this makes a useful quantum computer exist. 8 working qubits, however they were made, cannot do anything you would care about. The error rates in this whole field remain daunting. The very cold temperatures required are a serious industrial problem in themselves, and manufacturability is necessary without being remotely sufficient. Anyone telling you the timeline is short is guessing. But the reason to care is the same reason the transistor mattered, which is that manufacturability is the thing that turns a physics result into a technology. A device you can only make one of is a curiosity. A device you can print in volume on equipment that already exists is the beginning of something. This result does not prove a quantum computer is close. It removes one of the specific reasons to think it might be impossible. So the next time you see a quantum headline boasting about how many qubits somebody has, remember to ask the quieter question underneath it, not how many. How were they made? Because 100 qubits assembled by hand in a laboratory is a beautiful experiment, and 8 qubits stamped out by the same machines that made the chip in your phone is, potentially, an industry clearing its throat. And industries, unlike experiments, do not stay small.